Log4j. Introduction. Log4j is an open source framework for Java from the Apache Foundation, who started in 1996 as a tracing API. Apache Log4j is also part of a project which is known as Apache Logging. With Log4j, it's possible to enable logging at runtime without modifying the application binary. The Log4j package is designed so that these statements can remain in shipped code without incurring a heavy performance cost. Logging behavior can be controlled by editing a configuration file without touching the application binary. One of the distinctive features of Log4j is the notion of inheritance in loggers. Using a logger hierarchy, it is possible to control which log statements are output at arbitrarily fine granularity, but also gradius. This helps to reduce the volume of log output and the cost of logging. The target of the log output can be a file, an output stream, a Java I/O writer, a remote Log4j server, a remote Unix syslog daemon, or many other output targets. The configuration file could be on a Log4j XML or Log4j properties. Basic concepts. Using Log4j involves the following: or Apache Log4j logger class, who's responsible for handling the majority of the log operations. This ties the appender with the log messages that are coming from the Java application. Or Apache Log4j appender interface, who's responsible for controlling the output of log operations. This interface, which does the actual logging. It could be a simple file appender, and mul. Or Apache Log4j layout class, who's responsible for formatting the output for appender. This format is very similar to C language's printf function formatting. Appender interface. In Log4j speak, an output destination is called an appender. Currently, appenders exist for the console, files, string components, remote socket servers, JMS, NT event loggers, and remote Unix syslog daemons. It is also possible to log asynchronously. If you need to log to a particular output device, chances are good that someone has already written a Log4j appender for that device, although it is not difficult to write your own appender suite for your particular needs. Log4j allows attaching multiple appenders to any logger. Appenders can be added to and removed from a logger at any time. The most appenders used are console appender, file appender, rolling file appender, SMTP appender, and writer appender. Layout class. More often than not, users wish to customize not only the output destination, but also the output format. This is accomplished by associating a layout with an appender. The layout is responsible for formatting the login request according to the user's wishes, whereas an appender takes care of sending formatted output to its destination. Most layouts are not designed to be shared by multiple appenders. It follows that each appender has its own private layout. Types of layouts. HTML layout formats the output in HTML table. Pattern layout formats the output using a conversion pattern. Simple layout formats the output in a simple manner. XML layout generates the output on an XML. HTML layout. This layout outputs events in a fixed format table. Each row of the table corresponds to an event with 5 columns: time, thread, level, category, and message correspond to member fields of the login event. Pattern layout. As all layouts, pattern layout takes in a login event and returns a string. However, the return string can be modified at will by tweaking the conversion pattern. The conversion pattern of the pattern layout is closely related to the conversion pattern of the printf function in the C programming language. A conversion pattern is composed of literal text and format control expressions called conversion specifiers. You are free to insert any literal text within the conversion pattern. Each conversion specifier starts with a %sign and is followed by optional format modifiers and a conversion character. The conversion character controls the type of data to use: logger name, level, date, thread name. The format modifiers control such things as field width, padding, left or right justification. Notice some of the characters used for formatting. Here we have more characters that can be used for formatting. Please review. An example will be shown later on this chapter. Simple layout. Simple layout formats the output in a very simple manner. It prints the level, then a dash, and then the log message. This is a very simple layout option. XML layout. The XML layout produces a stream of log events in a fixed format. More specifically, the output of the XML layout consists of a series of log4j event elements as defined in the log4j DTD. It does not produce a completely well-formed XML file. The output is designed to be included as an external entity in a separate file in order to form a correct XML file. Logger class. Basically, a logger tells that the log messages from these packages should go to some appender which will log the message in the defined layout. There are 5 levels of the logger. Debug. The debug level is associated with minor and frequently occurring but otherwise normal events. Info. The info level is associated with significant events in the normal life cycle of the application. Deciding whether an event is significant or minor depends on many factors such as the time, the application development stage, the component doing the logging, and the personal taste of the developer. In the general, however, the frequency and volume of the events serve a useful yardstick for differentiating between the info and debug levels. The word level is indicative of minor problems caused by factors external to the application, such as missing or inconsistent input parameters supplied by the user. The error level is encountered more frequently, usually following a Java exception. Error conditions do not necessarily cause the application to crash, and the application may continue to service subsequent requests. The fatal level is rarely used and usually implies the impending crash of the application or the relevant subcomponent. These levels can be turned all off or all on. This can be done using the all or off levels. Take a look at the table. The login levels are hierarchical, which means that setting a login level affects other levels as well. The most verbose is the debug level. This means that using a debug level, all messages will be shown, using any of the methods involved. If you set on your configuration the info level, only messages from the info and above messages will be shown. This means that messages using the debug method will not be shown. If you set the configuration to use the warn level, then debug and info methods will be ignored. As you can see on the table, if you set any level indicated at the left of the table, then the output messages will be for the levels indicated at the top. Installation. The first step is to download the zip file from the URL proposed. Extract the jar file inside the zip file and copy the file into your lib folder. Also, add the jar file to the class path of your project. Configuration. This example shows a basic configuration of the log4j. As you can see on line 9, we have defined a logger for the class. We are using the logger class and the getLogger method to load a valid logger. Then we call the configurator method of the basic configuration class to load a basic configuration for the log4j, which uses the console appender. Then the debug and info methods are being used to send some messages to the output console and see the results. Please review the summary of the previous example. Please continue with the exercise. Take a look at the next example. This is the same example as before, but line 11 was added. On this, we're setting the login level on info. This causes that the debug messages won't be shown. As you can see on the execution of the file, only the messages through the info method are being shown. This is very helpful because you don't have to delete the debug messages you have written on your code. Just change the login level to a higher one. Continue with the exercise. Log4j configuration files. So far, we have used the basic configuration class to load a default login configuration, but if we want to use a specific configuration file, we need to create a properties file to include the configuration. The name must be placed under the source folder and it's called log4j properties. Also, you can use an XML file to include the configuration. Here's a sample configuration file. At the line 2, we have defined the root login level, and also we have added an appender called tutorial. The characteristics of this appender are defined later as well. On line 4, we're setting that the tutorial appender is going to be a console appender. Then, on line 6, we're setting the layout for the tutorial appender, which is a pattern layout. On line 7, the conversion pattern for the layout is set. In this case, we're adding the number of milliseconds elapsed since the start of the application with the R character. Then, the T character to output the name of the thread that generated the login event. Then, the P character to output the priority or level of the login event. Then, the C character to output the category of the login event. Then, the X character to output the nested diagnostic event associated with the thread that generated the login event. At the end, the M and N characters to output the application supplied message associated with the login event and the platform independent line separator. Here's the same example previously shown by using the log4j properties file. We have removed the line with the configure method calling, and we'll leave only the debug and info messages. Continue with the exercise. Take a look at how the output messages will look like. The login level was defined on the properties file for the whole application, but we can be very specific with some parts of the application. This means that we can define per package a different login level, increasing the options for manipulating such levels. On this example, we have added the line 3, specifying that for the com.tutorial package, the login level will be info. For the root logger, we have left the login level on debug. Now, to test this configuration, create a new package named com.log. Inside, create a new class named logTest. Take a look at the example. This is the logTest class, almost the same code as before, but line 8 is different. If you run this class, you will see all the messages, the debug, info, and warn. But if you run again the login prop class, you will only see the info and warn messages. The debug will not be shown because we set on the log4j properties file the info level for the package in which the login prop class belongs to. Continue with the exercise. Login in files. Using log4j allows you to have as multiple appenders as you want on the file. Logging on a file is a very common option because when an error is raised, you can analyze it later with the file. Also, you can schedule a mail system to send you the login file every day or upload the file to an FTP server, allowing you to stay tuned with the application performance. Take a look at the properties file proposed. On line 2, a new appender was defined. It's the standard out appender. Then, on line 4, we have defined the standard out as a console appender and the tutorial as a file appender. Then, on line 6, we define the name of the file, and at line 7, the max size that the file can have. Then, on lines 9 and 10, we define the layout for the standard out appender, and on lines 11 and 12, we define the layout for the tutorial appender. Notice that you can define different layouts for each appender. If you run the login prop file again, you will see two output messages, one on the output console on Eclipse and the new tutorial.log file created with the login messages. The file should be created on the same folder in which your project is saved. Please review the summary of the changes on the log4j properties. Please continue with the exercise. HTML layout. As we said before, we can use an HTML layout. This is a very useful if you plan to see or present the login events on a web page. Take a look at the example. For these properties, log file, we have standard out, file, and HTML outputs. On line 2, we have added a new appender called tut.html. This is a file appender, and the name is tutorial.html, defined on line 8. At the end, on line 15, we have defined the layout for this appender using the HTML layout. If you run the login prop class, you will see next to the tutorial log file, the tutorial HTML file. If you open the file, you will see something like this. Using either one plain file or HTML is just a matter of choice. Continue with the exercise. Login in the database. So far, we have seen how to log the events on the console and in several files as well. Also, you can log the events on a database, and that's using the JDBC appender. You have to set a few more attributes like the buffer size, the user and the password to access the table, the JDBC URL, and the layout, of course. The first thing we have to do is to create a new table for that purpose. Take a look at the table definition. These are all the columns needed to log the events. Take a look at the new definitions. We have defined two appenders, standardout and tut.db. tut.db is defined as a JDBC appender and the standardout as a console appender. On the tut.db appender, we have defined the JDBC URL to connect with the database, the JDBC driver, the user, and the password. Also, the layout for the tut.db appender. At the end, we have defined the conversion pattern for the tut.db's layout. In this case, we're setting the insert clause to be used to insert the new log event on the table. If you execute the login prop class again, new rows for the events generated will be inserted on the database. If you log into the MySQL console application and take a look at the table information, you will see something like this. Continue with the exercise.